Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode here on H's Media TV on YouTube. Yeah, like always, my name is Sam and today I will show you how to create a nice looking depth of field inside After Effects. I think many of you will know the depth of field, so if you open up the aperture from your DSLR or from film camera, so you get that nice separation from the background, foreground and the object which is in focus. And you can also create that same look in After Effects by using the camera or a second technique which I will show you now. So yeah, let's jump into After Effects and have some fun. Okay guys, as I said, I want to show you two techniques for creating depth of field. The first one isn't the real camera depth of field, it's some kind of, let's say, cheated depth of field. So it's actually just an adjustment layer with a blur effect applied on it. And the second way is then the original camera depth of field, like you are used to with your, from your DSLR, for example. So for the moment, as you can see, I already applied depth of field to my camera number 2. So you get this kind of blurred area in the edges, and here in the center you have this focused area, so you can read the text and also see some parts of the image. So if I zoom in, you can see that some parts of the image actually are blurred and only the center and this text right here is kind of sharp. So for the moment, let's delete our camera layer. And as I said, let's activate camera 1 without depth of field. And now let's create an adjustment layer. So layer, new adjustment layer, call it, I don't know, DOF, depth of field, and apply an effect called camera lens blur. Yeah, here it is. This blur effect is actually very cool because it tries to simulate real depth of field. So instead of just using, for example, fast blur or Gaussian blur, it really looks a bit more like actual camera blur. So yeah, hence the name. I usually choose a value between 5 or 10. It really depends on how much of this depth of field I want. So for the moment, I think something around 7 or 8 will look good. So yeah, let's try 8. And now as we can see, we blurred our whole image and we don't want that. So we need to, to mask out some parts we don't want to be blurred. Therefore, you can use two techniques. The first one is simply use this elliptic tool or ellipse tool. Then select your DOF layer and just draw a nice mask. Make sure to choose mode subtract, and yeah, then just if you want to transform your mask, double click on some of these points or on the path, and now you can rotate the path, make it smaller, make it bigger, and you can also, for example, let's open up the mask settings, you can also animate the path. So for example, if you have camera motion, you could also track that with these keyframes. After that, you can also play around with the mask feather and the mask expansion. So for example, let's deselect it. You can see that we get this super sharp edge, and that's definitely not what we want. So I would recommend to increase the mask feather to something around, let's say 300 or 400. It really depends on your project. So yeah, I think about 300 looks good. So we get that nice smooth transition like it would be in real life with a real DSLR, for example. And the second technique is using track matte. So let's delete this mask for the moment. And also select our elliptic tool or our rectangle tool. Let's deselect all the layers and then just draw a nice rectangle shape. Okay. And after that, let's apply an effect called Gaussian blur. Okay. And now simply hit F4 if you don't have the track matte menu activated, or hit this toggle switch mode button. And then simply choose Luma matte or Luma inverted matte. It's sometimes a bit tricky to choose, so just try and error. So as we can see, Luma matte is the wrong one, so let's choose Luma inverted matte. And now what this layer does, it simply tells our depth of field layer where it has to blur the image and where this effect isn't applied. So it kinda is the same as a mask, and the cool thing right now is that we can also rotate this shape, so hit R for rotation. And yeah, as before, you can rotate the shape. And of course, if you want to remove these sharp edges, just increase the blurriness, so let's say something around 200 for example. And as before, we get a nice smooth transition. Okay guys, before we move on to the second technique, which is the actual real depth of field technique, I would always recommend to use this first technique, this cheating technique, only on these kind of 2D slideshows, for example, because later I will actually show you a more complex 3D project. So therefore, I would always recommend to use the real camera depth of field inside the After Effects camera. So yeah, for the moment, let's delete our shape layer and the depth of field. And let's choose our camera. Of course, double click it. Before, let's make it fit. Double click the camera. And now, as you saw in part 1, I have this enable depth of field checkbox. So this time I want to check it. And as you can see, you get a lot of these values right here. So you get the focus distance, the aperture, f-stop, and blur level. The only values you have to pay attention are, of course, the focus distance. This one decides which part of your image is in focus and which one gets blurred, so a very, very important one. Then you have the aperture and the blur level. So by changing these two values, you can increase or decrease your amount of blur. Usually I don't change the f-stop, I don't know why, but like I said, I just leave it at default. Then click OK. To access the settings, you, like I said, can also double click to change these, or you can enable the camera options or make them visible. And as I said, you still have the depth of field on, the focus distance, aperture, and the blur level. So as you can see, I already have these blurred edges, so the same settings as before. Let's increase the aperture and the blur level to some super high value so that you can see it more clear. And now let's say I want that text to be fully readable, so I would choose focus distance. And now just, as you can see, the sharpness travels across my image. Of course, this sometimes may be a bit hard to process for After Effects, so it will take a couple of seconds depending on the complexity of your project. In my case, it kind of works in real time. So let's just wait a couple of seconds and I hope you can see it. Yeah, as you can see, the sharpness is now here in the left corner. And if I now move it a bit forward, you will see, let's, like I said, wait a couple of seconds. You will see that now my text gets sharper and sharper. Okay, so yeah, maybe something like that. So as I said, use the focus distance to choose the area you want to be sharp and the area you want to be blurred, and use the aperture and the blur level to change the amount of blur. And as with the layer mask, you can also use the depth of field to animate your depth of field. So let's say you have a camera movement from this image to this image. So usually your depth of field or your focus point or focus distance will change. So you have to always make sure that you set a keyframe on the exact position you want, so that the sharpness and the blurriness always travels with your camera. Okay, so now, as I said before, I will show you a second example, which is a bit more complex. So let's choose Open Recent Projects and camera TUT number 1. Just click on Save in my case. Again, let's wait a couple of seconds. It's a lot of waiting time today, so sorry for that, guys. And yeah, as you can see, we get this kind of complex computer animation type of project. Actually consists of numerous 3D layers, so let's show you that by selecting, for example, Custom View 1. Hit C for camera, and if I now pan around, you can see, let's again wait a couple of seconds, okay, that this project consists of a lot of 3D layers, so we get these moving lines in the very back, and then some pixels in different levels in 3D space. So, like I said before, it would be a bit difficult or it would look not as good as the real camera depth of field if you would choose just an adjustment layer with a camera lens blur. So, like I said, for these type of projects, I always recommend to use the real in-camera depth of field. So just to show you the before and after, I will now make a short photo. By the way, this is a great way to compare before and after stuff in After Effects. So for example, if you want to know how a project looks with and without an effect, just take this snapshot right here, then select our camera, let's disable depth of field, click OK. Let's wait a couple of seconds again. And yeah, here's the after. So in my opinion, it looks too confusing because of all these geometric shapes. So here's the with depth of field and without. Of course, it's all a matter of personal taste, but I definitely think that the version with depth of field right now looks a lot more interesting, and I also think it adds a bit more quality because also in film industry, depth of field is always what people want because it makes your image look more interesting and also draws the attention of your audience exactly at one point where you want them to look at. Because like I said, all these background animation stuff is confusing and I want my audience to look at the center of this image. Okay, so therefore I would enable my depth of field again to make this image, again look better than before. Okay, again wait a couple of seconds. Okay, and yeah, that's basically it for the camera depth of field tutorial. Like always, just play around. If you have some projects where you think depth of field will look good, just like I said, try and error and see if it looks good. Like always, if you find this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe. And also please check out my Facebook page to see more of my work, also write some messages, and yeah. With that being said, I hope I see you next time, stay creative and yeah, have fun.